And this particular round is quite apropos for the tea that's about to get spilled up on this stage as we begin to talk about the mainstream, the opposite of the mainstream, the underground, the fringe, the subculture, where the real people do psychedelics. What's happening over there? What's the future of that? How do we protect it? How do we celebrate it? Because life is but a dream. So let's start over here. Y'all can start us off. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Keep going. Y'all still got it. You still got it. Life is but a dream. And what a sweet dream it is with psychedelics in it. Can I get a what? I'm so excited for this time today as we get into talking about the subculture of psychedelics, its future, its past, what is it, why it's important, how can we preserve it and protect it. And we have a really amazing group of folks coming up here to share the stage. I will also be joining in as the moderator and a panelist for this one. And I'm excited to be able to share the stage with these wonderful folks. So I'm going to call them up, and then I will actually share a little bit of my piece first. And like we've been doing, we'll each get to share a bit of our story and vision and slice of the dream, and then we'll go into a discussion and then open it up for Q&A, for some questions. So remember, we're using the Slido. Keep the questions coming. They've been really, really excellent. This conversation is super important, and it's going to go deep. It's going to go deep and wide, just like the underground, if you will. So without further ado, I just want to welcome, and you can come up as I call you in. We have the one and only Annie Oak, who is the co-founder of Take 3. Yep, you can clap. Yep. Bia Labate. Bia Labate, PhD, extraordinaire, anthropologist, executive director of Chacruna Institute, and Keith Gilmore, president of the Portland Psychedelic Society. And you have me, yours truly, Hanifa Washington, out in these psychedelic streets. And I think that's probably the best way I can describe what I'm representing on this panel. I really am out in these streets, doing all types of things, in the streets, under the streets, on the streets. And I wanted to share a little bit about when I think about subculture, when I think about the various strands of delight happening. And I like to think about it as fringe. And so I actually wrote something out. It's a bit of a poem or a tale, if you will. And it's called Fringe Benefits. I have always gravitated toward the fringe of society. When I think about it, fringe, I think about cutoff jeans. I immediately just think of cutoff jeans. And that thick fray, you know, when you first cut the jeans and it's just that thick fray, but over time and eventually it begins to soften and morph and shape with washing and wearing or not washing. But eventually it evolves. I like to say evolves, not devolves, but it evolves into a dysregulated installation, a constellation actually, committed, united, tickling at the knees and thighs. Some of the strands twist and braid together, others isolate themselves. And like magic, they begin to become that of a stalagmite. They start stalagmiting, yes. You know the ones that get real long and thin and kind of pointy at the end? I love those, and I like to wear those like a fucking badge of honor. They're all just doing their own thing, you know? The more you wear, the more you wash, the more independent this collective of ragtag fabric becomes. And that's what's so cool about being on the fringe. We accept everybody. The long, straggly ones, the ones braided together, the ones almost falling off. And that's what it's about, being on the fringe. Being on the fringe is about the unraveling. It's not about looking the same, being in lockstep. It's about the decolonization. It's about the repurposing. It's about the reimagining. It's about the thrill of actual fucking freedom as you ride on the edge of existence. From the 3 years that I spent in my 30s sailing on the replica of the Amistad, yes, a tall ship, a schooner, a wooden boat, a boat made of wood, traveling up, down, and all around the Atlantic basin, out into the deep blue sea, out on the edge, in the wind, coming in and out of ports, whispering at the edges of cities and towns, crisscrossing the watery borders. Or perhaps it's all the way back to that one time a decade before in my 20s, when I accidentally stumbled upon something called the National Rainbow Family Gathering. I had no idea what it was. And on a whim, I joined them. And I traveled across the country in teepees and vans and buses, around campfires, in the dark wilderness of America's forests, howling, living on the edge, moving in caravan further and further out. So it's no surprise to me that here in my 40s, I'm out here on these psychedelic edges, tenured as a dweller and a holder in the underground. I sit in an interesting place, having come above ground in the past 4 years. I feel a moral imperative that if the exploration of mind, expression, and healing with psychedelics is happening above ground in regulated, quote-unquote, systems in the communities that I live in, I must be a part of supporting the development of those systems to ensure that they promise and promote justice and safety. Physical safety, emotional safety, cultural safety, and environmental safety. So I have aligned myself with community-serving projects and initiatives committed to that. I've served on the founding team of Fireside Project. We launched the National Psychedelic Peer Support Line in 2021. Yeah. That's received over 20,000 calls at this point. In March of this year, I co-founded the Psychedelic Health Equity Initiative and we are working to ensure that folks from marginalized communities in this society have access to affordable, safe, and effective psychedelic-assisted therapy and wellness. I'm also currently enrolled in Intertrek psilocybin facilitator training program with the intention to create experiences of healing and wellness for brown and black folks and other marginalized communities. And despite being above ground and also straddling and slinking in the underground, I feel that this work here is still very much on the fringe, united, committed to tickling ever so slightly at the knees and thighs of America's mental health industrial complex, whispering lovingly, another way is possible, another world is here. Thank you. I'll take my respective seat and welcome Annie Oak to the mic.
Hey, everybody. Hi. How are y'all doing? Good. Well, my name is Ann Harrison. I'm the managing editor of Lucid News, and I have covered Horizons as a journalist, but I am not here to talk with you today about journalism. I'm here to talk with you as a community member, where I'm known as Annie Oak. I'm the founder of the Women's Visionary Congress, which, like Horizons, thank you, held its first event in 2007. I'm co-founder of its parent nonprofit, the Women's Visionary Council, which was created in 2008 to amplify the voices of women in psychedelic communities. I'd like to echo, honor, and support the land acknowledgement and indigenous communities who have lived on this land and the indigenous people who have used psychedelic medicine since ancient times. My ancestral lineage is Northern European, and I continue the traditions of people whose spiritual practices are tied to the cycles of the earth: healers, midwives, witches, plant people. I want to take you on a very short storytelling journey to talk about the cultural lineage of several communities, focused largely on art and music that have created containers for transformative personal experience that include the use of psychedelics. Social use of psychedelics in community settings is sometimes referred to as recreational use. I prefer to think of it as collective transformational use that reflects lived experience. These communities do not follow medical models. People who use psychedelics in these settings are not waiting first for FDA approval, or state legislature, or a ballot initiative to create a regulatory structure. And most people who explore psychedelics today and in the past do so in these settings. I've been a member of some of these communities, and through my mentors and teachers, some of these groups are part of my lineage. I have tried to carefully observe how these communities have helped care for their members, support the exploration of personal expression, gender, and sexual identities, catalyze social change, and celebrate joy, which is an important goal. I took this knowledge and adapted it, as artists do, to co-create my own community. I'm the co-founder of Take 3 Presents. We're a for-profit company whose mission is to orchestrate peak experiences that catalyze personal and social evolution. Since 2013, we have been producing private immersive art parties and created a community where many people have had transformational experiences. These states of consciousness are sparked by many factors, not just psychedelics. People get into altered states through music, dancing, theater, art, spiritual emergence, and sleep deprivation. Our participants are asked not to share identifying information about our events or art or storylines, but as co-founder, I have over the years talked about ideas for holding a safe container that we adapted from other communities, and in some cases modified and improved on, as artists do. I believe it's important to talk about this lineage and to honor the people who took risks to create these systems. I'm the safety director of Take 3. I manage legal liability, negotiate the insurance coverage, and manage the safety teams. The safety teams I've adapted from other communities are intended to be peer-based, scalable, and inexpensive to replicate. I believe in the Creative Commons. Please take these ideas and improve on them. So what communities do we draw lineage from? We certainly draw our lineage from historic communities, including the Rainbow family, the Grateful Dead community, the Merry Pranksters, the Hog Farm, the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, where I've lived for 25 years, the Oregon Country Fair community, the Cacophony Society, the WVC, the Rhythm Society, and the Burning Man community, and many other communities and subcultures, including BIPOC, queer, and sex party communities, who have been treated as outlaws or harassed as subcultures. So what have I learned about holding a container for people in transformative states of consciousness? First, people can have deeper transformative experiences if they feel safe. There's no such thing as perfect safety. We all know that. But we also know that it's possible to increase safety. People do overdose themselves. People take compounds that are misidentified. People violate each other's boundaries. We're flawed humans, and yet we reach for transcendence and connection. I've been a burner since 1996, and my Take 3 co-founders were also burners. We adapted many ideas from Burning Man, including creating a theme and a story for each event, thematic, immersive art, live music, and the use of snarky humor and satire to make statements about social systems. We also embrace the Burning Man principles of leave no trace, radical self-expression, radical inclusion, immediacy, and civic responsibility. When I created our safety department, I also borrowed ideas I learned as a former ranger at Burning Man. I created a ranger team made up of community participants who assist participants, de-escalate conflict, and are on the lookout for unsafe situations. I hired a team of professional medics who have experience at working with people who are in altered states. And our version of the Burning Man Crisis Intervention Team is made up of mental health professionals from our community who support participants having mental health challenges. We have a quiet, direct care space that is like the Zendo, but run by our own community members. Our community is unusual in that we offer services year-round. And because we are a private community where you must be sponsored by an existing member who is responsible for you, it's a community where people are accountable to each other, and it's a very interesting laboratory for social engineering. Also, our safety systems are far from perfect. We have worked for years to gain the trust of our participants and respond to their needs and concerns. We're also a historically white community. We've been focusing on welcoming members of BIPOC communities, setting aside tickets for members of these communities, and making sure that these people are represented in our leadership and care teams. We've also reached out to people of all ages, including elders and the parents of our participants. Right. I think one thing that's often overlooked in risk reduction services that we do try to address is the need to investigate, mediate, and act on interpersonal conflict and boundary violations, including assault. I have been assaulted. I was not going to lead a community where impunity is the default. To address this, we formed a mediation team composed of respected people from the community, most of whom are mental health professionals. It's led by a professional social worker, and I am on this team as well. We take reports from participants, we investigate them, and if we feel they have violated our community agreements, even at events outside of our own, we take them off our list. I have also removed people from our events for violating the safety of others. Often their friends come to you and protest this action, and you have to stand firm. While we've had to address boundary violations, overall, I would say we have a good safety record. Part of this, I think, is due to the fact that we don't serve or sell alcohol. We don't ban alcohol. You can still bring it in for private use. But unlike many party or festival communities, it is not central to our business model. We don't make money selling an inferior drug to people we love. Thank you. We think this has reduced aggressive, violating behavior and alcohol-related accidents. Instead of a bar, our social center is a tea house that I started as a Burning Man art project, which was the inspiration for the Zendo. All of our venues and events have also always been cannabis-friendly. Because people may use psychedelics or mind-altering substances, we also work with the nonprofit DanceSafe to provide on-site drug testing services using FTIR spectrometers, and this helps to prevent people from ingesting misidentified or adulterated substances. This is especially important with the presence of fentanyl and compounds acquired on the black market. We give away fentanyl test strips. We also continue to work with DanceSafe to develop new safety protocols. And importantly, we acknowledge that as a community, people have a right to have transformative experiences and also a right to privacy while having those experiences. They have a right to feel safe, to not have their images show up on other people's social media feeds, and to have medical and mental health care if they need it. I believe that by creating caretaking systems and safe containers for people to have transformative experiences with psychedelics, we can help support the potential for the type of social evolution that psychedelics can help create and the pro-social behavior and mutual caretaking that these plants and compounds inspire us to pursue. This requires some courage and the willingness to take risks, but I think it's worth it. Safety is an art form, and I look forward to seeing how you and your community create safe containers and learning from you all. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Do you hear me? I want to thank Kevin, Kate, and all the organizers. It's a great opportunity to be here. I feel really honored to be in Portland, celebrate the traditional people of this land. My name is Bia Labate, and I have tried psilocybin mushrooms when I was 19, backpacking in Mexico in Huautla de Jimenez. And since then have been very devoted and inspired to this path of sacred plants and dedicated my entire professional career and also my spiritual path to study plant medicine, ceremony, ritual, religion, sacred plants, indigenous people, new hybrid forms of rituals. And I was asked here to speak on the behalf of plant medicine ceremonies. I have published 28 books along this journey. And I feel it's a bit of a weird question to stand up for plant medicines, because for me, that's just, the way things are. It's where I come from. What is mainstream and what is subculture is really a matter of perspective. On my book, it's pretty normal to drink ayahuasca and kind of exotic to think of athletes taking psychedelics and going on TV talking about it. So I am Brazilian and I have been to hundreds of ceremonies, and the question is hard to answer. Why does it matter? It's just traditions that exist. This concept of subculture was developed by sociologists. I had a whole history here on the concept of subculture, but it was emerged in the works of people like Howard Becker and others of School of Sociology, Robert Parker, and they started studying what they called deviant groups, deviants, and kind of tried to give a positive approach to the idea that these cultures have merits, have a certain logic, and that they need to be respected. And later on, this concept was problematized by sociologists like Stuart Hall, that claimed that it still implied that there was a certain homogeneity to these cultures that didn't exist, and sort of what we call today intersectionality, that the idea of subculture did not necessarily point to difference of races and gender and age and other markers, and that it assumed a certain kind of cohesion to these groups that was not necessarily real, and also that these groups, despite we're approaching them as deviants or alternative, also reproduced structures of power and oppression like the wider societies. So I just want to start by problematizing this idea of what is subculture and what is mainstream. To start off with, I guess that's my anthropology take, also to look at the questions that were posed critically in this relationship. What is mainstream and what is subculture really depends on where you stand and who you are. What is the perspective from where you talk about what is big, what is small. That's my first point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make is this idea of scaling, and apologies in advance if this is not a very popular idea, but from the cultures, I have sat in ayahuasca and peyote and mushroom ceremonies. There's not this idea that you necessarily have to scale things up. That's not a concern for people, that you need to scale and make this big and everybody should have access to this. From the sensibility, the protocols, the methods, the aesthetics of the communities I've sat in, it's considered something very personal and very private to take, for example, ayahuasca. It's something that it's not my job to go lobby that other people should try it. It's very, very personal and very intimate. I have participated in hundreds of ceremonies, and I have been asked over and over to talk more about my personal uses, but I have always been kind of discreet about it, because the way I was taught and the way I was brought up in my circles, it's not something that you lobby and you try. It's a kind of bad taste to make marketing out of it and try to convince other people, because it has to be a kind of calling, and the person needs to take responsibility on those choices. So that's the second point I wanted to make. It's about what is scaling. And then the other point I wanted to make, I'm calling here requirement versus best practices. So here in this conference, we're talking a lot about rules, licenses, permits, regulations, and things like that. So, however, cultural practices and traditions, they have a certain way of doing things. Again, bringing my anthropological training, we must really acknowledge the importance of informal, cultural, and social forms of control. These forms of control, they are local, they are community-based, they are bottom-up, and normally they are really stronger and more efficient than rules, requirements, laws that tend to be more universal and more top-down. So basically what I'm trying to say is that in my traditions and in the studies I've developed, it's not so much about all the rules, but it's really about the best practices. It's about the knowledge, the tradition, the ways that certain groups develop methods to use these substances. So in the Chacruna Institute, we're really concerned about the idea of teaching psychedelic churches to self-regulate, the importance that we create systems, that we discipline ourselves, that we train ourselves, that we keep ourselves accountable, and we teach each other these forms in which we do things. And so in some, we have to I think it's less about formal enforcements and more about spreading this knowledge that already exists, that communities have been engaged, and to listen to these plant medicine communities that have been doing this since sometimes time immemorial. And then I want to make my next point, which is healing really depends on context and community. Traditionally, plant medicine ceremonies happen in collective settings, and these settings, they can be really influential and healing. So I want us to encourage us to think about both the collective dimension of psychedelics and the spiritual dimension of psychedelics. Ceremony honors beauty and the aesthetics through music, ritual practices, and natural settings. In these settings, psychedelics allow people to access spirituality directly without intermediaries. The current emphasis on the individual, on therapy, and on the emergence of facilitator experts raise a few flags to us. The over-professionalization of psychedelics care is concerning to me. How is this trend related to capitalist values and systems of oppression? So, should we be taking care of a person, create systems that one expert is paid in a specific amount of money for a specific amount of time to take care of a person for one day? Or should we be thinking of systems of communities that are really taking care of people, where, you know, kindred people look out for each other? And how can we extend the positive effects of psychedelics over time? So, whereas we all want to see this movement advancing as a whole, the current influx of money has also opened the door to power accumulation and the spiral of greed that transforms groups of similar interests against each other and turns allies into competitors. I think we all hear a lot about excess of training, lack of services, and dried up money in this community. So here is the invitation from the world of plant medicine communities to think about other ways that we can try to bring this healing that have already been happening. As Annie has already, I think there's a lot of similarities with what she was saying. There are communities that are already doing things on the ground, that are not waiting for FDA or trying to see the new ballot measure, that there is this knowledge and wisdom there to be learned from and for us to take a look at. And then I also want to echo what she brought, that in this eagerness to create method systems that we think are going to be popular and respected, sometimes we forget the role of joy, of pleasure, and of arts in this healing and transformation. So that's the next point I wanted to do here. There is a value in artistic expression, to seed the culture with thoughts outside the box that show the unseen, invisible world and inspire awe and humility. The role of joy and pleasure can be seen in the way gay culture uses psychedelics to bond as outsiders who think and feel differently. So I am also inviting us to think about the importance of ritual music, pleasure, community healing, all of those things that we know are important. And I'm here talking on behalf of plant medicines and traditions, whatever that means, because again, to me, it's natural and it's the world that I come from. I think what is very exotic and wild is everybody trying to make money nonstop and trying to be the new expert on LinkedIn. That is, for me, the fringe thing. Also, it's just incredible the lack of humility of people, as it was said here by Mona and Osiris, that have a few plant medicine experiences and then self-proclaim themselves experts, and this ability that exists in the United States. And I'm married to an American, and I have an American citizenship, and I love this land, but also how intense it is that everybody tends to be like the expert with, you know, how it's getting commodified in scary ways. Again, what is mainstream and what is fringe and subculture. I feel that all of that is happening now, this is really what is not very, normal in the psychedelic movement. That this new phase we are on is the one that is raising eyeballs, and not the traditional use, sacred plants, shamanism that have been doing this for millennia, where psychedelics are part of culture, tradition, identity, land, territory, kinship, transmission of knowledge, transmission of language, expression of arts, and so forth. And I want to conclude by saying that I'm still so touched by these huge inequalities that exist between North and South. And I want to invite all the therapists and clinics and service centers and everybody that is wanting to do things in the right way. What are we doing to give back? And this was also talked here, like there are people that brought these substances to us and have been doing this traditionally, and are we standing in solidarity with their religious issues? Do we know what are the main things that are pains for indigenous people? Are we helping them? Can the psychedelic movement be more political and support minorities and talk of things beyond psychedelics and beyond this obsession and fetishization of indigenous people's knowledge on psychedelics, but help these groups as a whole? Can we give back? Can we think of ways to soften this inequality? Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Keith Gilmore. I'm the president of Portland Psychedelic Society. Hey. I want to talk about psychedelic community. So we live in a world that is disequilibrated. And as we move through the world and see the world that we live in, we can see this across pretty much any domain that you want to look at, utilizing any metric that you want to determine it by. But particularly so in the realms of psychology, spirituality, and society. You know, there's more psychospiritual maladies cropping up more and more in our modern times. And the fabric of society is rending. We feel it. So the psychedelics are now re-emerging in a major way in the global culture. And it's transpiring rapidly. It's coming on faster and faster. Now, psychedelics, we know well, are boundary dissolving substances. This is a classic way of understanding them. Psychedelics dissolve boundaries. So we're bringing psychedelics into the global culture, these boundary dissolving substances, at a time of unparalleled instability. So what could go wrong? So here's some possibilities of what could go wrong. Politicians utilizing psychedelics for their own ends as pawns in their own machinations, and that causing a whole slew of issues with the unfolding of psychedelics in society. Infighting among groups who ultimately want the same thing, and we see this happening already, but who feel like they have a claim on how these things should be utilized. And meanwhile, they're, blowing holes in the hulls of one another's ships without fully recognizing actually we're all in the same ship. Here's a potential issue. Amazon branded microdoses. It's coming. So can the cultural infrastructure wield the weight of this utter paradigm shift that is destined to emerge? It's already buckling under the weight of consensus culture, and now we're going to introduce this unfolding, this revelation of this psycho-shamanic reality that most people have no context for understanding. So we have to do this properly. The global economic system is not going to hold this. The entire political structure isn't going to know what to do with it. The healthcare system isn't going to be able to keep up with the pace of this. And so for me, where I stand, what it comes down to is community. Community is the structure that can hold all of this. Because community is an ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, there is no hierarchy of value. There's no dogmatism. And there's no bureaucracy. In an ecosystem, every component informs every other component. Everything is interdependent and internetworked. And true community is like an ecosystem. So if I'm in community, understanding this interdependence, I recognize that I need to hold myself in integrity because the integrity of the entire community depends on my integrity. And likewise, we living in community, being in community, we can recognize the need to hold others accountable to their own integrity. Again, because everything is so internetworked. And I know that the way to hold people accountable in their integrity is love. And this is something that I don't personally hear talked about a lot or much at all in a lot of psychedelic conversations, is love. But to me, love is the central ethos of psychedelics. It just is. Yeah. And I will go so far as to say that the reason that psychedelics are so effective is that they remind us of the primacy of love. That is the reason they're so effective. So, you know, we're introducing psychedelics into these models, the medical model, the therapeutic model. But if you're a doctor, if you're a therapist, and you have a patient come in and you tell them, I love you, and you mean it, you very well might lose your license. So, and I'm not knocking those models. I think psychedelics need to be incorporated in these models, but we get to decide what models we want to utilize. We get to imagine a new future that's completely novel in which these things are incorporated in the flow of all of it. So, to me, community is the way we figure this out. And it's a big figuring out because, you know, there's the idea that has been said in many ways, I think, that do we want to introduce psychedelics into this economic system, or do we want to imagine an economic system that is psychedelic? So the last thing I'll say is that I feel as though the term community has been used a bit frivolously in the internet age. You know, we talk about the psychedelic community, but what people mean when they say that is really just people around the world who have an affinity for psychedelics. When the type of community I'm talking about, there's a felt sense of kinship. When you're embedded in community, there's a felt sense of kinship. And a true community has soul. So only by maintaining this felt sense of kinship and this connection to soul and respecting and honoring the primacy of love will we figure out how to incorporate psychedelics on a global scale. And that is done through true community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is this thing on? Okay, great. So we are rowing our boats gently or semi-aggressively down the stream. And really, we just want this time that we have left here to be in curiosity, to be also in the sacredness of imagining. You know, I think that as you were sharing, yeah, we do get to imagine. What does this look like down the line? What do we desire? Where is the joy? Where does it continue to thrive and grow? And so I'm going to get up in just a minute because I left my little pad in the back, but I'll be right back. But I wanted to just start things off with a question for all of us, if that feels good. And we all have such different spaces and angles and perspectives and values, right, when it comes to this work and also this playground that we're playing in. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And I am very actually curious in terms of your own experiences and beyond the things that you're already very deeply established in creating or developing or leading. You know, what is the psychedelic future that you want to be a part of? Yeah, I'm going to start with you, if that feels okay.
The psychedelic future that I want to be a part of, it's one that honors human flourishing above all else. You know, we're emerging into a space where there is and will be a lot of money to be made, and there's valid criticisms to levy against that. And at the same time, I say, make your money in the psychedelic space by having the vision to be early. I'm sure a lot of people are here figuring out how to do that, but we have to do it honorably and even immaculately, because these substances are sacred, truly sacred, and so they must be held sacred. And we're introducing economics into something that has existed before culture has even existed. So it's going to get weird, but if we can keep ourselves aligned, then we can make our money. That's okay, as long as we're doing it honorably.
Thank you, Keith.
I think to me as an anthropologist, what really also is always challenging is like this biomedical domination of everything and this need to justify that psychedelics are healing bothers me, because it's not just about that, it's much more than that. It's really about understanding that these are cultural practices that have deep roots, not only for indigenous people in some deep Amazon forest or some jungle or deserts or other parts of the planet, but they are part of cultural traditions. They are part of who we are. They are part of what we do. So I wish a psychedelic future that we have other paradigms that are not so binary and so reductionistic, and that we stop to have to justify who we are and what we do as if there needs to be some kind of reason or justification that is not put on other realms of life. This is a simple, natural part of life, the desire to alter your consciousness and the wish to be in community and the wish to evolve and the wish to explore what is beyond the invisible world, the ancestral world, who we are, what we're doing here, where we came from, why we are on this planet, the pains and mysteries of existence, the lack of responses, the fear of death, the camaraderie, the family, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the fact that we are just here passengers of this temporary mystery, and just to feel good about it and not to have to justify because it's this paradigm or that paradigm or this schedule or that schedule or this reason or that reason. I do it and I feel good about it, and that's part of who I am. And I thank so much the luck that I had in my early 20s to have that chance to experience this and have this friendship, this allyship, this spirit of family with my beloved sacred plant allies that helped me so much. And I just feel good about it, and I wish other people understood and took it easy and stopped judging so much, and so much stigma, so much ignorance, so much pettiness, so much reductionism, and so many medical doctors that really don't know much, like having a say on everything all the time.
Yes. Yes.
I want to see a future where there are a lot of different types of psychedelic communities. There's always been many different types of psychedelic communities. I've been doing psychedelics since the 1970s, and even back then, there were many different communities that used sacred plants, that used compounds to evolve and transform themselves. I want to see a future where if you want to access psilocybin mushrooms through an Oregon model, you can do that. Mm-hmm. I want to see a future where if you feel more comfortable with the medical model because that's what you find comforting and appropriate, you can do that too. And you can also join a local psychedelic society. And maybe that's your jam, because that's your local community. Mm-hmm. You can be in a community with people who have specific interests, parents, young people, queer folks, many different communities who are all interconnected, looking out for each other, supporting each other, respecting each other and their traditions, and co-evolving together. Because there are going to be a lot of different needs that people have to engage with psychedelics, and a lot of different experiences that they want to have. So I want to see a multiplicity of communities, and my wish is that the leaders of these communities learn from one another, stand up for each other. If they're harassed by law enforcement, that they're there for each other. They have each other's backs. This has been true for many years within some communities. Understand that people, especially people of color, will be and have been targeted by law enforcement and will continue to be. And stand up for communities who are being pressured, isolated, targeted because of who they are. This is really important. It's got to be a collective action. And I think that as psychedelic communities have gained more political and social acceptance, largely due to the efforts of organizations, largely positive media support, that forward action needs to be supported and carried by an ever larger group of people who are supporting our rights to have transformative experiences. It is truly a bipartisan political issue, one of the very few. There is no resistance out there politically to particularly people like veterans having access to psychedelic-assisted therapies. It's an issue that brings people together. Maybe this is the intention of the plants, to bring us together at a time when there's so much political polarization. It's one of the few issues. So I think we have to make the most of that, to love one another, to learn from our experiences with the plants, and then to expand that out into the larger world, to create the healing that we would like to see.
I'll jump in, and then I think we'll have time for one more question, because that time is a little off. I just love psychedelics. They're just wonderful. And I see these places, these spaces that are in every town and city, that are just like designed for play and enjoyment, whether you're working with a plant or a substance or not. I think there's space to imagine these beautiful places that have gardens and flowers and places to gather and sit, indoor spaces for dining together and being in community, multi-purpose spaces. It's community centers-esque, but with more spirit, right? With more soul and more buy-in from folks to co-create and consciously co-create. And to know that, yeah, this is a space where people may be experiencing and working with different substances and friends and teachers. I think it may exist in other places in the world, but I haven't seen it quite yet. I've seen parts of it, right? I think about like a Zen center meets like Meow Wolf, like meets like the YMCA kind of place. With like beautiful lush gardens, around, and I think it requires like these types of places require like a fundamental shift in what we prioritize as society. And so it's this chicken and egg, because I think the more we normalize, make safe, and enjoy these relationships with psychedelics, the more we can decolonize our imagination to begin to create things like this and to prioritize and fund them with our collective resources and energy and wisdom. So that's the world that I see, and and why I do and engage with the things that I do. Because I really do think we're edging, we're edging there as we row our boats down this stream. We are moving into our rounding this out, which is wild. It really went by super fast, and there's so many questions. But I did want to ask this one that is very pressing. As somebody, as we all are on this stage, very much have different tendrils in all types of different spaces. And, there's dual relationships that we're all, that we explore with people, like they're on our board. We may have other types of experiences with them. We're, crossing boundaries. We have different priorities with different people. And there's also a tremendous amount of levels for harm, right, and abuse, and misuse of power. And that freedom, right, assumes that people all have good intentions and move in wellness and safety of all. So in these freer spaces, in spaces that aren't regulated, where there are different models of accountability, I'm just, curious to know what you've seen that actually works when it comes to keeping people safe physically, emotionally, when it comes to calling people in who have harmed, and how do we continue to do that in ways that do not replicate systems of incarceration and the penal system? How do we hold those things in balance, moving toward freedom and being safe and accountable? And anybody can answer that. You don't all have to do it.
Well, I talked a fair bit about how we do it in our community. Mm-hmm. Ours is a really unusual model because we're a private community. And if we feel like somebody in our community has violated community agreement, violated the safety, the boundaries of somebody in our community, we have the power to take them off the list. However, we've made some important decisions, I think, about how we do that. We don't publicly shame people. Don't publicly shame people. We take them off the list and we say to them, we're going to try to help you find the resources for the healing that you need. And hopefully you will find them. Come back to us in 2 years. We have created a path back. Right?
Yeah.
I think that if it's a community built on love, it has to include the redemptive narrative arc, right?
Yeah.
Have to offer possibility for people to evolve and transform themselves with love, and to care for themselves so they can better interact with their community. It's easy to toss somebody out. It's harder to build a path back. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've thought a lot about this. And also, we have to be sensitive to the needs of people who are violated. Make their safety a priority. Make their safety a priority. Make sure that if there's a path back created, they feel safe within our community, that they have a voice also in how that process works. It's hard. It's really challenging. But what I've seen over and over the decades where I've been a member of psychedelic communities is that conflict, unaddressed, creates the implosion of community. Right?
Yeah.
A large part of risk reduction, not all activities are harmful, but some are risky. I prefer the word risk reduction. Part of that is creating systems to deal with conflict and violation. And that is part of community building, that each community must decide for themselves. It has to be a reflection of their own cultural values. It's a very difficult thing to export from one community to another. We can share ideas, certainly, as I've tried to do here, but each community must decide for themselves, among their council of wise people, elders, respected folks, how their community is going to deal with that. Right?
Sure.
And then take firm action. And then, as I said, when the friends of the person that you asked to leave your community, taken off the list, come to you and pressure you, stand firm in your conviction. Refuse to be a community of impunity. Yeah.
I would just love to completely co-sign everything you just said. I think that was brilliant and spot on, and I hope we can all imbibe that and take it in and then take it out to our communities. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna give my own anthropological answer to this. I have given myself the nickname of Tia Bia, Aunt Bia. It's because I like to teach and to learn, and I believe in the power of learning, and I think learning can be fun, and so I think it's all about us learning, like a parent teaches a child good manners and what's integrity and what's honesty and how to behave. We have to have a culture of learning around psychedelics, and starting this also when we are young, because in most traditional cultures this is something that a parent will do with the children. It's a family matter. It's something that starts since you're small. And so learning about this ways to better do things, to behave and to watch older people, and there's also space for mistakes and for perhaps not getting things right. But it's really about cultivating knowledge, and also coming back to the psychedelic field and these little bubbles of this ecosystem. Where is the place of education, really? everybody talks about education, 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 but who's really promoting education? We are. The Chacruna Institute is trying to do that, and it's incredibly hard because you also have to justify why it's important to have conversations, to learn, to exchange, to talk about cultural issues, to talk about knowledge. There's hardly ever any funding for that because that's not very applied, that's not very objective, that's not very tangible. You can't measure, you can't make deliverables. But it's really important that we create spaces like this. I think also people that organize conferences know how challenging it is to get funding for conferences and how hard it is to show the importance of us being together and having conversations and learning and observing and being in the hallways and exchanging things, talking to our elders, getting inspiration. So asking questions and coming back, to the topic that I was talking about, my practice being allied to indigenous people, not being indigenous myself. But it's like when you're a guest on somebody else's house, you ask questions, you ask permission, you stay silent, you observe, you try to learn. You're not ashamed of trying to understand and trying to know the reasoning and the proper way, the protocols. There's already a huge amount of knowledge, and we have to keep on fostering this knowledge among ourselves and being curious and not being ashamed of asking and of learning and doing mistakes and calling each other when we see things that are doing wrong. So I think it's pretty simple. It's how do you learn hygiene? People have to learn by talking to their peers and learning these shared values.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to give my heartfelt appreciation for each of you, and I could stay up here and play and roll down the stream for hours and hours, but we've come to our time. So I just speed round. If you had 15 seconds to say anything else that you wanted to sprinkle out, to 15 seconds, each of you. If there's anything, any magic, any spell or intention or wish you want to throw out, we'll start with you, Annie. Yeah.
Be kind to each other. Test your drugs. And practice good self-care, right? The first rule of triage is taking care of yourself so you can take care of others.
Thank you. Tia Bia?
I forgot to say that I think learning other languages is something really awesome that helps a lot in communicating. And I'm a firm believer of the importance of reading and learning about the peoples and the traditions that you're interested in. And I also want to invite everybody to come to Chacruna's next conference, Psychedelic Culture, Not Science. It's in April in the Bay Area, and we also have done some very cool t-shirts for this occasion. So visit our table and get your Christmas gift if you want. Support Chacruna. And I want to give my special thanks for Kevin. I know he has had a hard year, and really love you, Kevin. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you.
I will say, you are all my brothers and sisters, and I love you, and let's go do good work.
That's it. One of the other mantras that came through with that album that I recorded, and I've sang the song before, I'm not going to sing the song, but the line that I want to impart so that we can keep doing and spread the magic is breathe in, breathe out, speak truth. So remember your breath. We often aren't breathing correctly. So drop into, it's free, it's juicy, it's amazing, it's sensual, it's fun, it's responsible. So breathe well and speak truth. Speak truth to yourself first and then to others. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yay.